In today's global world, companies and organizations are in a state of survival. What does that mean? How do companies today tap into their frontline people and ensure that everybody's together on what the organization and or the company is trying to achieve? It is not unusual. In fact, it is probably all too frequent. As we go into different clients, we find that two things. First of all, everyone is not aligned to what the company is trying to do, or in company words, there's not consistent buy-in. And the second thing is the organization's feedback systems are broken, or as we call it, the transparency of people to speak the truth and what needs to be spoken to the people that need to hear it doesn't exist. So in this video, we're going to talk about what we call the brain's lifeline to success, and how does a leader lay out the process for how people will engage in their own creativity and engage in working towards meeting the priorities of the organization from the senior executive level all the way down through the first line department unit manager. I'm Tony Dattino, president of Dattino Consulting Group, and we've been in business for almost 25 years. My background on the feedback and on the S really comes from my initial experiences in working in the IBM company, when at a time our company was facing competition and was facing challenges that we had never seen before. We paralyzed our workforce, we caused people to be risk averse, and we didn't have a clear understanding of what we were actually trying to accomplish that was communicated all the way down throughout the organization. That left me with, how could so many smart people and so many smart executives not figure out how to mobilize a workforce or unite the company that actually grew up realizing it was the company and the power of individuals that made it so successful. And we kind of lost the whole nature of the feedback system. It made me think of an experience I had where I came to address the division presidents, and I got escorted out by one of the assistants and said, "You can't go in and tell them the truth. You upset them and you make them get angry." And that left me with, isn't that kind of silly? That when you go into an organization's senior leaders and you speak with integrity and you speak with facts and you speak with details, that you get escorted out and told you can't upset them or you make them angry. It was never my intention to make people angry. It was never my intention to get people upset, but it was my intention to get people, like I call it, a poke in the ribs, so they'd wake up and say, we've got to look at doing things differently in a global market where competition was coming at us in ways that we had never envisioned or seen before. And so it caused me to really begin to learn more about how can an organization that was so awesome and so incredibly gifted almost fall off the edge of the earth and almost fall off the cliff in the sense of doing that. So one of the first things I learned as I started to go through learning how the brain works and going to a seminar way back in 1989 was an organization has to clearly define what we call the big S. So let me start here by saying the big S is what we call success. So how does an organization establish what its primary goals, strategies, and objectives are and ensure that folks throughout the leadership chain are all bought into it? And what I began to learn and how to bring alignment to it actually ties back to the communication process. So that when you're asking people to do something, first of all, you have to appeal to what we call their rational thinking. Meaning, what you're asking people to do has to make sense. It has to appeal to their sensibility so that in terms of what you're asking them to do, they walk away and say, what I've been just asked to do makes sense to me and it's logical and I should want to do this. But the second thing that has to come to play when we talk about the big S is that we also have to realize there's an emotional attachment to it. And the emotional attachment in the research that we've done has been clear. When I'm being asked to do something that may be logical to me, I also want to have a level of energy that touches my passion, or touches my, as we may call it, our hearts, in a way that it gives me energy to want to figure out how to achieve this S. So what happens in terms of our thinking and our feelings is we go from here to here and back to here, and say when my rational brain and my emotional brain align and lock in on what we're asking it to do, it will now use the infinite thinking of our brains to figure out how to. And as I learned that, there were three things that always became an imperative when then talking and giving feedback to anyone. So tip number one, when giving a person feedback, so it's not viewed as a defensive personal attack, number one, you must know what their S is. Meaning, what are they rationally trying to accomplish, and do they have the passion to want to achieve it. Tip number two, when you're giving someone feedback, before you go in or stop to talk to someone and give them feedback, the second thing you've got to ask them, is this a good time for you and I to sit down and have a conversation? I always remember in one of the meetings I attended, I wish I knew this lesson, our chief financial officer asked a group of our managers, of which I was one, to give him feedback because there were some things that were not happening, and he asked for feedback. Well, what I didn't realize is this was not the right time to give him feedback, because what he was really saying is just tell me that everything's wonderful and we're all working in the same direction. But I put up my hand and I raised the issue of where we were missing. Here was some feedback of something that you are not achieving, or we're not achieving as an organization. What I found out later on from my immediate director was that was not the right time, and it probably was not the right place to embarrass the chief financial officer, in his view. I thought I was giving him feedback that was going to help us move forward in an organization, and so I walk away with the lesson number two: always make sure there's the right time and you're in the right place before somebody's going to be given feedback. And the third lesson I've learned in the course of my experience is always have a suggestion based on the feedback of what was done well and what was done wrong. What suggestions might you have that can move it along a little faster? So my point here is always point out to whomever you're giving feedback to several things that they've done well, and when you point out to them something that wasn't done quite as well, always have a suggestion on what they could do better. And I always remember my brother, and times we'd go out to dinner with he and his wife, and we'd ask, where would you like to go to dinner? And he'd say to me, Tony, you pick it. You decide where you want to go. And I'd say, okay, how about if we go out for Mexican? And he'd say, no, we really don't want to go to Mexican. You know, wife and I don't want to go to Mexican, but you pick where you want to go. So I'd come back with the second go around and say, how about if we do Italian? And he'd say, not really. I really don't want to go for Italian tonight either. But you know what? You pick it out and you figure out where we want to go. Finally, I said to him, Paul, here's where we're going to dinner tonight. If you want to join my family with your family, you can meet us here at 6:30 p.m. on Saturday night. My lesson to you is, when you're giving someone feedback, always give them some suggestions on how and what they could have done better. Well, we're going to take these lessons and our whole brain's formula for what we call success as the feedback system being its lifeline to achieve it. And we've packaged that into 5 modules at a seminar or workshop that we're putting on in New York City on October 25th. And that workshop is not for people who don't want to learn how to align a group of their frontline or employees into what the common objectives are of the organization. It's not for people that don't want to give feedback and want to learn how to improve. And it's not for people who are satisfied with the status quo and are comfortable with where they're at. So what we've done is, with my colleagues and the years of experience we've had, we've taken the most compelling, impactful lessons, of which these are just a few, in what we define as the Big S, and we've packaged them with 5 modules in this one-day workshop that we're doing. And this will be the first one, and we call it the Big S, and how do you set the feedback for the environment for feedback to be the lifeline. We've put a second one in there called brain-to-brain communication, which is a way of saying, how do you begin to engage people in this dialogue so that the intentions of what you're trying to accomplish are carried out by the actions of the people that need to do the work. The third module we've got is what we call the impact of mirror neurons. And the more we learn about our own thinking and the way that our own brains work, we come to realize that the terms mirror neurons are kind of like foreign and unique to people, but yet they impact the behaviors of the whole organization. And leaders' mirror neurons are being picked up and learned and copied, and leaders' behaviors are being copied, and we need to identify what those are and how do we modify and change them. We're going to do module 4, which is managing our emotions, and how does that build the connections in our interactions with our employees. And then finally, we'll close it out with what we call creating the cycle of a return on investment. So what's the structure of how you take all of the things in these 5 modules, put them together, and create a high-performing organization? What I can promise you, from the 20-plus years of experience that my team has had in doing this work, is this can be a personal life-changing experience for you, or it can be clearly a life-changing experience for you and how you lead an organization and engaging people to be at their best. What we love about this work is not only will it impact your work environments, but it also has an ability in taking the skills we're going to teach you and applying it to your personal life. We looked at the pricing of this, and we started to benchmark against workshops that really don't deliver half the value that we have put into this. And we decided after a lot of negotiation that we wanted to create kind of like a mass revolution of people that were going to be learning these things and leaving that workshop excited, enthused, and making a difference with the people that they're around in their support structures. And so we've priced it at $500, which some may look at and say, wow, what a deal. And when we leave you at the end of that workshop, you're not even going to say, wow, what a deal. You're going to be able to ask, when do we do the next one? And share the next group of modules with you. I look forward to seeing you there, and the only caution I will give you is we have been very active in pulling this work together, and we have a limited number of seats. So please get to work, get onto the DatinoConsulting.com website, and get your seat reserved October 25th, New York City.